Oh, hi, Sindhoor. Thank you so much for joining us for this Emotional Wellbeing in Animals conference.
My pleasure, as always, Andy. I love chatting with you. I can't wait to do this.
Well, we were talking before and about whether a presentation would be a good idea or whether just to have a conversation. And I think this is such an important topic. And I think it'd be a powerful thing for the delegates to hear this as part of this conversation. And we're going to be looking at the complexities of social richness in dogs. That's what you've framed this as. And it's an area that we're really exploring. And I think it'd be a good place to start, actually, for you to share a lot of your own observations. So you're over in India, and a lot of the observations you're doing with street dogs, of course, and looking at them when they have more freedom, more agency to be able to engage in their own social dynamics.
Yeah, absolutely. So first up, I think I prefer doing this in a conversational style because when I usually talk about street dogs, streeties, and their little antiques and the things that they do, I realize that for a lot of us, this is just life. This is what we are used to. This is normalized. And so I don't always understand the perspective of a listener who doesn't have this exposure. And so when I talk to my students, particularly those who are outside the country, and we're sharing stories, we have these informal WhatsApp group and we're sharing stories. And I find my non-Indian students are usually completely fascinated with, oh my God, is this even possible? Are you guys lying? Like, are you making this up? And there is that additional layer of explanation that needs to come in, a little bit more context that needs to get added for them to be able to really picture this and to understand it the way we understand it. And so I think having it a conversational style is a bit easier because it helps me understand what it is that you don't have the luxury of seeing or have the luxury of experiencing. Where is that gap? You can actually bring that up and say, whoa, wait, back up, explain that a little bit more. And it gives me a chance to make this more useful to you. And so I love having conversations around them. And really, at the end of the day, I think um, telling their stories and trying to learn from them is a conversational approach to start with, right? Because I'm not an authority here. I'm only narrating their story, and how that story lands and how that goes into shaping your practices, your beliefs. That's on you. So this is something we are actually doing together. It's kind of a co-creation. It is a conversation. It is meant to be. And so putting that in the form of a presentation would just be kind of clipping its wings per se. And so I thought this is a much better way to do this. And so, yeah, I think I love talking about the complexities of the of social lives of dogs, because there are four dogs here on this property. They were here before I bought this property. So, when people ask me, "Do you have dogs?" That sentence doesn't make sense to me. It's irrelevant, not applicable, because I don't have them. Uh, but maybe they do think they have me. I'm not very sure about that. But I'm in a very privileged and lucky position to be able to observe them. I can see what they're up to. I can see the things that they do, the things that they occupy their day with, um, and 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 ponder over questions, right? The things that they do, free living animals, when you give them complete agency. And I do take care of their meals, I feed them. So when they don't, then when they're not worried about food, when they're not in a state of disease, healthy, free living dogs, uh, what do they end up doing, right? What does their day look like? And what would one imagine a group of four dogs would do? First up, I think this is something that a lot of people are now slowly coming to terms with. A large part of their time is spent sleeping, right? And this is something that we've had to go around busting a lot of myths around this, is that they're not these extraordinarily active animals. Like I mentioned, they're right outside. I can see them. One of them, they've been sleeping all day, and it's quite hot in India already. And until the sun goes down, which is going to be around 7 o'clock, they're not even going to get up. Not going to get up, as in I call them, I tempt them with food, and they're still lying down there and the tail is wagging. So you know that they know I'm talking to them. And they're like, Maybe not. Whatever offer you have, can you come back 2 hours later and try that? So so for starters, they do spend a lot of time resting, sleeping. But what about when they're awake? What do they spend the bulk of their time on? Here again, I see a lot of misconceptions. I think thanks to television channels like, your National Geographic and things like that, and the kind of emphasis that has gone into documenting traditionally sort of attractive activities of an animal, right? And so we've spent a lot of time kind of documenting hunting, mating, fighting. So this is fascinating for us, and we think somewhere that animals spend a lot of time doing these things. This is their like core of what they do, and outside of that, we're not even sure what they do. But the truth is, that's not what I see with dogs. Bulk of their time goes into very passively and gracefully maintaining, building, maintaining, repairing relationships. That's really where so much of their awake time goes into doing things together, exploring things together, grooming each other, allo grooming, spending time in each other's presence, as in proximity, physical proximity, sort of napping on each other or sitting very close to each other. These are all different kinds of activities that they spend their time in. And in addition to that, and when they spend, and one of the things we need to remember is when they're spending so much of their time on social activities, and they're social beings, and social beings, a very critical part of being a social being is having that kind of uh, rich, complex network. So it's not exactly like, hey, these dogs know each other. That's not the end of the relationship. That relationship can be defined in so many ways. For instance, Chaita, I make fun of her that she's the matriarch around here. Uh, and I make fun that she's extremely political. Right, I say she plays dirty politics. And now those are just funny ways for me to explain what I'm saying. But the truth is that the animal behavior world doesn't give me a good enough repertoire for what she's doing. So she, for instance, will have opinions about most other dogs around here. She's friends with some dogs. She's enemies with some dogs. She's in between with some dogs. There was a time when she was great friends with this guy, a dog I had named Elvis. And then suddenly, at some point, she decides she doesn't want to be friends with him anymore. She turns around and starts yelling at him if he, just enters the street here. What happened there? Why did it go from friendship to what does not look like friendship anymore? And what was really interesting about that observation, that I think was one of the first times I realized, okay, there's a lot more to this, right? Because when Chaita turned on Elvis, um, all the other dogs around here turned on Elvis too, all of them, including at that time Chiru was alive. And Chiru too, I would make fun that Chiru has a giant crush on Elvis. She would, every time she saw him, she would be doing a little dance, please, can we come, ask him to come into the property. And then when Chaita changed her mind, Chiru too changed her mind. All of them started barking at Elvis. Now, how did this happen? Why was there this kind of a contagion in you know what was experienced? And it's only Chaita who does this. Other dogs have changing opinions. It doesn't seem to impact the group. Why is that? Why is that? For instance, Dude, the male dog, as part of the group, if he doesn't like a dog, recently he did that. He didn't like a dog, so he tried to intimidate some dog, and he thought he had his girls' army. He had his girlfriend Chaita and his daughters Iti and Yaya, and they always act like a team. They got each other's backs. So he thought, I got my girls. I'm going to go pick on that dog. And he went for it, and he didn't realize Chaita is extremely political. And a big part of being political is you pick your battles, right? So Chaita was like, sorry, but not my monkey. I'm not getting into this fight. You're on your own. Bye. I actually saw her look at it, assess the situation, and then do a 180 and walk away very nonchalantly with this, not my thing. And her daughters were very quickly it seemed like they were like, no, no, we report to her, not to you. So we're not coming into this battle with you. So everybody ditched him. Poor guy was alone in his little battle. And I think he learned a lesson or two. And the reason I narrate all of this is to highlight, look at how much they're getting to experience, right? Look at the richness of all of this, of what does it take to make friends with another dog? What does it take to repair a broken friendship? What actually goes into changing the dynamic between multiple dogs? These are questions we don't have answers to because we are obsessed with just observing, okay, mating, hunting, fighting. Let's look at that over and over and over. Let's debate that endlessly. Let's theorize that endlessly. But really, the bulk of the time that they spend in all this other complexity, we have no clue about. And that's very telling on our own biases and the kind of conversations we would like to have. And why are we obsessed with this? And so, for us who look at emotional well-being of animals and social animals, we have to remember that social interactions, rich social interactions, are also a necessary part of that experience, that social experience that goes into the well-being of a social animal, right? We are social animals, so we need friends, we need foes, we need to gossip, we need to complain about each other, we need the good and the bad and the ugly. We need that. If we don't have it, we act out. It should not be that difficult to imagine that this richness of a social life in itself is a critical requirement for a social being to experience well-being. And I think as we discuss as caregivers, how do we increase well-being? This is a tool that we should be looking at. Kind of social richness is a tool that we should be looking at.
Yeah, I
It's a
think
lot.
it's got that. But I think it's such a powerful way to start this off because you talked earlier about I love how you frame it as narrating their stories. You know, you're saying it as you see it. And I love the way that you add those extra little kind of flavors really, because as you say, there's nothing really to pin onto other than, well, it kind of feels a bit like this because we don't look at it enough. So it has to be that. And the complexities of social interactions, what I also hear from you there is um there may be aspects of needing to connect because we have to feel we have social connections, but there is a lot of that story which sounds like they want to engage this way. It's almost like, do you know, I'm sleeping because I need to get my rest, and then I need to maybe do a little bit of kind of housekeeping. But after that, I want to be social. I want to go out and see people. I want to kind of, and I think the dynamics of creating those relationships. When you were talking, we could quite easily be looking at young children here actually, and how they do some of these things and the awkwardness about some of it, especially when you're younger, and the confidence that comes with it when you're older, and some of that kind of deferential aspect there that comes into social dynamics. I just think it's fascinating. And I think part of the problem for us as humans is, especially I can only talk here in from the UK point of view, it may well be the same over in India or anywhere else you're listening to around the world, but we put so many social constraints on ourselves about how we communicate and how we engage. That's probably why we're not particularly good at seeing it in the animals around us, really, when they're like, well, actually, we're doing this because we need to, and because we want to, and we want to make these social connections. A little question on Elvis. Uh, did you find that some of the other dogs, if they met Elvis away from everybody else, oh, hi, mate, how are you today kind of thing? Because there wasn't that pressure to be the woof woof kind of side of it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I did notice Chiru do that. So when we met Elvis in places away from home, she seemed to be different around him. But then again, that's a very hard one to kind of isolate in that sense, because we were away from home. So her own state of mind would have been different. She would have probably been more cautious. She probably is not in a place where she wants to express anything that can lead to tension. She's
Mm,
probably going to be more reserved, much like how we would be, right? Like if you were here spending time with me, we are in our PJs, we're catching up. There's a lot more we're going to be saying to each other and crossing boundaries with each other. I might be feel more empowered to actually express my disagreements with you as well, more less cautiously, maybe. Whereas if I am dressed up, I am in somebody else's place, I have taken the trouble to put myself together, I am in a different state of mind to start with. And so that itself is going to change how we're going to present to the same people in a different environment. And I think that's also interesting and important for us to consider, right? How many times have we seen people, for instance, take their dog to a dog park, see the dog behave badly, and then check the dog in for some kind of rehabilitation when the dog has no problem in their environment, in an environment that's comfortable for them, they have no problem. And so a lot of, for instance, the bark's way of dealing with it is sensitizing people to that conversation, right? Which is, why do you feel the pressure to put your dog in situations where the dog does have a problem and then try to fix something that isn't actually broken? Why can't we rather figure out how do we, okay, I'm getting a good idea for, what works for you. So how do we find different ways to enable that environment for you? Um, I think that's a different conversation that we should be having. But like you said, I think what stops us, and when I ask people, right, what stops you from just doing the easier thing here, right? Your dog does better in a different environment, does poorly in that environment. Don't go to that environment. Stick to what they seem to do better. And what's stopping you? And more often than not, it is our own conditioning of what we believe, to some extent what dogs should be, but also to some extent what we should be. And interestingly, that also changes between men and women. That will change from country to country, culture to culture, because we all have certain pressures put on us on how we are expected to behave. And very frequently that translates to our expectations of others as well, right? Because it's like, I think there's a bit of, hey, I put in so much effort to bend backwards, get rid of my authenticity, and show up in a way that's socially acceptable. So I'm kind of expecting that of others as well. And so to me, really the most exciting part about these conversations that we've been having, Andy, is if you see many of them keep circling back to ourselves in discovering the richness of the life of dogs and creating space for it. I think we can start doing that for ourselves.
Well, yeah, because I think all these conversations come back to us really because in one of two ways, either a recognition that we do have to question the lens through which we see the world sometimes because of the conditioning we've had ourselves. And there's a great kind of phrase in psychology, which is perception is everything, because that perception does drive your responses, but also recognizing how much of it has been applied to us, how we felt the pressure of others' judgments, expectations, societal norms, conformist approaches, all these things. So it's quite a soup, really, that we have to kind of work through. And I hear what you say there as well. This is what's really interesting for me and important about your observations and the narration of these wonderful animals that you see around you and how they interact, because it gives us a better window into how we support our dogs. Especially, I'm thinking, I can only talk from a UK perspective, but I think dogs who share our lives within the domestic environment and how much we class kind of social related challenges like reactivity. In my
Hmm.
experience, many of the dogs I work with don't have a problem with dogs per se. They have a problem with how they're feeling already and what they're already dealing with. And we know with humans, the thing about being socially safe and being able to engage socially, there's a lot of things that the brain and the nervous system, the body needs to make sure are in place first. That's why if you're not feeling very well, you won't go to the party. You won't go, you don't want to be sociable. And do you find that yourself that when dogs are not feeling great, or maybe they've been injured, that their social dynamic changes, their ability to engage socially shifts?
Absolutely, right? I mean, and that's the no-brainer. That I think that's the part that is most evident to us is social interactions. I think unlike sort of so if you look at the ethogram of an animal, of an animal like a dog, you will see that there are sort of, typically scientists will classify that as individual activities or joint activities, and the things that you do by yourself, those set of activities are often um, it's simpler in a way that there isn't that additional energy being spent in being mindful of the other. So you're doing this by yourself. So if you have to go poop, you have to go pee, you have to go eat, these are not, it's just that there is just that activity. Whereas let's say that you're sniffing something, it's just that activity, you're sniffing something. But if you're sniffing, doing it socially, if you're doing it with another individual, there is the additional kind of load on you on what is the norms of now being with the other. What pace do we do this at? I watch out for you, I respond to your cues. And um, you may be communicating something, you may be having a good day, bad day, you may be communicating your excitement or your boundaries, and I need to be in a space to process that, understand that. So now something as simple as sniffing has become, whew, that much more. There's so much more processing. There's so much more processing, both physically. You are looking at the other individual. It's emotional. It's um, physiological. It's there is proprioceptive input that's also flooding you, and so it should not be a no-brainer. I mean, it should be a no-brainer that if we're not feeling well, if our baseline is somewhere off, social activities, for instance, are the first place where you're going to see it flare up because we don't have the internal resources. So, for instance, something as simple as, I gave you an example. It is being social is also, there's a physical load. I have to look, I have to be aware of where the other individual is. And if I have a neck pain, I'm not going to be able to do that. In which case, when I'm a species where so much of my communication is embodied, so much of what I have to say is with my body, and I don't know where the other body is in relation to my body, I'm not able to shift my body in relation to the other body. I'm not going to be able to communicate very effectively. So communication has started failing now. I am jittery because I don't know what you are trying to say. I'm not able to say to you what I have to say to you. So what should have been a pleasant activity is now a stressful activity. And so is it possible that, for instance, what should have been maybe a great date with my husband turns into me snapping at him because I'm just not able to do a joint activity at that time because I'm so overloaded. So I definitely think that health impacts social activities quite a bit, actually.
And it makes sense because even for us, if you're not feeling very well and you're in town and you see a friend, you're more likely to avoid them
Yeah.
because you don't have the bandwidth. And that's even with somebody where you are confident of a safe social outcome, let alone being in
Yeah.
a situation where you're not sure.
Yeah.
And on top of that, also, I think when we think about, for me, it's an area that we also need to look at, which is how our dogs, when we think about social processing theory, about how from a young age, but we continue to kind of encode information from the social environment around us, how it makes us feel, how we're supposed to interact, what the kind of rules of social conduct might be. And how many people are from a young age again, that kind of encoding isn't very helpful for them. So they perceive social situations to be threatening when maybe they're not, or however that might look. The similar processes surely must be happening for a lot of people who have looked at these kind of things have said they don't see why this wouldn't apply to any social mammal, actually, because it's important to think about what social safety means and how you have to engage with it. So when we think then about the dogs in our homes, about what they're encoding and taking away from their relationship with us as well, about what that feels like for them.
Yeah. Yeah. What's very interesting and important to remember about social, any learning that has to do with the social realm of things, whether it is social learning or it is learning about being social, um, there is a huge element of the other. It's not something you do in isolation. And there isn't a single right or wrong there. It is always the lesson to learn is the relational lesson. So what I'm trying to say is, for instance, I might learn social etiquette and learn it beautifully, and I've had the perfect training, but I had it in India. And that may not translate to anything if I'm visiting the UK. There's a whole new learning that has to happen. What is polite when I'm interacting with my Indian, South Indian mother? What is considered polite and what is considered impolite does not translate to another part of the world, which does not mean that my social training hasn't happened. But that is the nature of social training. It is relational. There is nothing called as a universal polite or impolite. What we consider polite is a contract between you and me. It is a you me thing. It is that specific, right? You may be from the UK or maybe from India, but we still connect at a different level that has nothing to do with UK or India, because it is between you and me, right? Your life experiences and my life experiences and what brings us to this place. And another significant aspect of it is the duration of our interaction. Over the course of time, who have you become and how much of you have I learnt about? And how much can I show up for you as a friend that would matter to you in a way that is acceptable and palatable and polite and nice to you? And so it's a very it's an interpersonal thing, and it has to do with the relationship. And so I think we do play a very significant role in it, but also we shouldn't um, overemphasize the role of human beings in it, because just because they are a certain way with human beings does not mean they're going to be that way with dogs. That's a lesson they need to learn from dogs. Just because they are something with dogs, we don't have to panic that this is what they're going to be with human beings and try to fix that. They are separate. And I think that they have to have opportunity to learn in multiple situations. So good learning environments, they need environments. You don't learn how to be social in a massive rave party, right? That's not where it happens. These are meant for deep relationships. They're meant for complexity. They're meant for longevity. You should be able to form friendships, fall out of it, and get back in it. That's when it starts becoming, it's carrying that full richness and complexity. And for that to happen, there needs to be a sustained kind of contact, building over time, giving space for them to go through this rigmarole and go through all of this. um, and so I think it's not as much for me a lesson learned at one point, learned, you know, locked and loaded, and we're good to go. No, I think this is a lifelong thing. It's an experiential thing. It's a lifelong learning. Learning can be so enjoyable, important for brain plasticity. The brain guys can talk about it much better than I can. So we know that we should be learning. And I think social learning is that great opportunity that's there constantly for us. And I think it can be very enjoyable. And I think one thing I would really love to start seeing in maybe these sort of all your conversations that people are having around well-being and wellness is introducing this. It's like food, right? You don't say, I have fed nutritious food for the first 6 months of the dog's life, so now he's sorted. I need to feed him anymore, right? So make it enjoyable, sustainable, and part of a great wellness routine for the dog, which is engaging in, I don't know, pajama parties type thing, right? Like I'm trying to paint a picture here of the kind of situations we need to enable for our dogs, and it does not include meeting random new dogs, different dogs in a dog park all the time. That is not it.
Well, this is really important because we know from a lot of the how we look at young children and developmentally regarding social confidence and social safety, how it starts with secure attachments with the immediate family, having some really good friends that they can trial social skills with, being supported within the schooling environment, especially during social time. So schools who have a way of moderating playtime a little bit rather than just be a free for all. But again, if you have a young developing brain who feels insecure in any of those aspects, then that's that perception of that environment. And this is why we've got to challenge, I think, this notion of socializing for dogs, which is, go out and meet loads of people and do loads of stuff. Actually, it starts from home. It starts from in with that relationship they have with us and having some dogs. And there's a great value, I think, to family and friends who have dogs who they can get to know and be with. And, when people meet Molly, who's our youngest, and we really took a kind of we didn't do a lot of the usual stuff with Molly, and I'd like to think that that was all about me and Kieran, but my husband. But actually, it was because she came in with our other two dogs. She had them,
Yeah.
And Harley, especially, who she adores, and Harley was like, "I'm not sure about you," and she's like, "I'm going to love you, and you're going to love me," and it was just interesting to see the dynamics there, and how she found that safety. They were her return to safety, and I think that's an important aspect to any social connection, isn't it? Because I
Yeah.
think if we have a forced social dynamic of any sort, and there isn't connection there, there isn't safety there, there isn't the ability to have. I love the title to your presentation when I saw you at the Animal Behavioral Kent conversation over here in the UK about conflict is connection, because we have to recognize it's part of a healthy social relationship to have the falling outs and how you repair things. You just can't do that with every single, when you think from the dog point of view, all those kind of that richness, those complexities in the dog park, on the beach, in the thing with all these different things. And I think it's an important thing we have to understand. And actually, Sindor, means that we have to rethink pretty well everything that we've taken as given for that first 12 months of a dog's life, actually, from a
Yeah.
UK domestic point of view.
Yeah. And let's not forget. So one of the things that I did realize when I presented that talk, and I have been presenting those ideas, and I've been showing clips of what conflict in a dog's world looks like. And it's really interesting because I've realized the people who don't spend time around free living dogs don't know what healthy conflict looks like. What does healthy conflict look like? What does healthy conflict resolution look like, right? We don't know that. And so we're boiling this down to this extremely simplistic view that good conflict resolution is no conflict. That's not it, right? There has to be conflict. And how does that resolve? And there is going to be sounds and sights that we don't like. But I think those are the questions we need to be asking ourselves. Why is that we don't like it? What does normal look like? Or is the idea of normal overrated? What does conflict in a dog look like? At what point can I tell myself, okay, my dog's not being a monster. My dog's just being a social being and having a disagreement, for God's sakes. I can chill about this. And no, it's not to say let the dogs fight it out, right? That's not it. But it doesn't have to be these two extremes. So the other interesting thing I also kind of realized at that time is I was talking about the idea of elder based structures and how they organize themselves, how they learn from each other, how they show up for each other. And it was interesting because I found that people who do not live in elder based structures and have never seen elder based structures don't know what to expect, don't know what to see. So they are under the impression that, for instance, an elder based structure means that there's going to be all these younger dogs uh, treating this older dog with extraordinary reverence and making space for them. Not true. That's not how elder based structures work. I know of how some people treat their elders, which is despicable. But still, despite the despicable treatment, there is an elder based structure. What does that mean? So I don't think we have answers to all of these complexities. And I think that's the part that I would encourage people to, every opportunity that they get, to try and observe. Um, and as you start observing the kind of conflict resolution that they engage in, you will also see the places where they seek social support. So for instance, if you're learning a physical skill, right? And learning involves making mistakes. And if you're learning a physical skill, you make a mistake, you fall. You're learning how to ride a bicycle, you fall. And if somebody has to support you, they're going to probably come and help you get up, maybe nurse your physical injury. They're there, make you feel better, try to give you more confidence. Now, how do you do that for a social interaction? What does a social bruise look like? When you fail socially and you fall and you hurt yourself, what does that look like? And what is the support that you can give? Where does that support come in? This is an interesting one because, quite honestly, we are terrible at this even with human beings, right? If I have done something that has socially hurt me and I seek help, frequently what I need is for somebody to show up, how to sit there and be there for me rather than advise me on how to behave better. And I
That's
think that's that. what we're doing with dogs too. So again, I think, some of these lessons are so good for ourselves and our own relationships.
Well, they are, and this is the heart of it. I think there's so many things that we do again with children that is not helpful, that we can recognize is the same as what we projected this onto our dogs. You know, the kind of the difference between that heavy structured learning attainment based thing that we, because we're obsessed with it here in the UK, in the West, really, you know, put kids through school, dogs through dog training, and not recognizing the kind of individual achievement through experiential learning and how important that is. And there's a great saying again in kind of human psychology therapy terms about there is a difference between what we're taught and what we learn, what we actually learn, and especially that notion about feeling safe and how do we become socially safe? You know, it's such an important thing, and many people don't actually. They find ways to mask things. They find ways to kind of overcompensate and restructure. I think dogs do too. I see it, you know, here in the UK about how they develop their own coping mechanisms, and people think, "Oh, my dog loves other dogs." I think your dog's absolutely stressed out their eyeballs here, but they're using a play or appeasement or chasing around or something of a way to try and deal with it because they're stuck. They're stuck
Yeah.
there. They can't be socially appropriate. They can't find a social exit. They can't socially engage in a way which isn't uh, associated with a lot of hyper arousal.
Yeah. Yeah. This, I think, is, I'm sorry, it's going to get a little noisy here. They're on, I live on a construction site and they're offloading bricks right now after work hours. I don't know why.
I can't hear anything. We're okay. We're okay.
Okay. Okay. Sounds good. Um, yeah, absolutely. I think the kind of interactions that we see with, just give me 1 second. Maybe you can just cut this off. He's going to really bring it down in just a second.
I think while they're doing that, I think I just mentioned so I just feel a bit myself and whilst they're delivering the bricks, so I couldn't hear anything in my end, but uh this is what's so important about what you can offer, I think, from your observations over there, because you know, when we think about the individual um, life journeys of the dog. So I could go out now. I live on the beach here down in Devon in the UK, and it's great. And you just see lots of dogs. Most of the dogs there are just going through the motions with things because they have to, because there's so many dogs there and they have to interact. And there's a lot of running around, a lot of barking, a lot of being crazy, you know. But if I was to
Yeah.
pick 10 dogs there and I was thinking, well, I'm going to do a study of these 10 dogs, it gets very
Mhm.
complicated because all of them have had so many different aspects of that beginning of their life. There's no kind of naturalistic element there. There's a lot to unpick. And that's why I think
Yeah.
we fall very easily into just kind of doing observations based purely upon a behavior in the moment and
Yeah.
by that. The richness you
Yeah.
offer, of course, is that you can narrate the story of these dogs, so they don't they have that more naturalistic start to things. They create these things, that elder-based structure that you're talking about, that kind of deferential thing. A lot of people are still stuck in the whole dominance thing, of course, but I think you know, we have to recognize that most social structures are based on a deferential structure and often around an elder-based style of things, even if it's just within the family unit.
Yeah. Yeah. And to your point, Andy, which I was trying to respond to earlier until I had this little thing over here. Um, I think so much of what I see our pet dogs, companion dogs, captive dogs, pick the term that works for you, all the same to me. Um, what I see with these dogs and their style of interaction, and it's so starkly different from what I see with free living dogs, to the point where, for instance, I have run into situations where a ex companion dog, a dog that is kind of either run away or been abandoned, comes and joins a group of street dogs. And now I'm able to look at the behavior and tell them apart, saying, okay, this looks like a dog who has been brought up in a household, because their social interactions are so starkly different from what I see with free living dogs. And it's not a pleasant difference. I mean, this doesn't bode well for us. It's not a great commentary on us, because when they are in our care, it seems that their social interactions seem to be very simplified, It's missing nuance, it's missing richness, it's missing thought. It's not mindful, it's not deliberate. So it's almost like this. Um, how do I say this? This person who shows up to a fine gathering of people having a great discussion, and this person just walks in and is talking rubbish. It's just all eyes on me, attention on me, kind of a thing. Doesn't understand the norms of the group. Um, and that simplification of it, that oversimplification of it, I think is a direct result of what we envision in them. So they become what we envision them to be, right? And we envision this Disney version of the dog, this version of the dog that aligns with certain beliefs of ours, sometimes even boiling down to kind of religious beliefs. Bizarrely, that's a whole other topic that I can talk about, but strange beliefs coming from all over the place. They're just beliefs, not facts, and based on that we create a mental model of this hyper simplified, oversimplified animal. That's what the animal should be. This is what the animal should enjoy. This is what the social interaction should look like. And then we're molding them into that shape. And if you want to see that complexity, you have to believe that it exists and you have to bring it out. And so I'll give you a little bit of an example, it's a little close to my heart. Growing up, um, I was not seen as somebody who was very socially acceptable. I tend to be opinionated, and for an South Indian woman, that is not seen as a good look, right? And opinionated, I was called things like loudmouth, you're extremely opinionated, short-tempered, so on and so forth. And I saw myself as all of that. So I've, tried to seek help to say, I want to get better. How do I do this? And then I ran into a bunch of people, most significantly, my late husband, who was completely in love with that richness, that complexity in me. He was in love with that. And that side then allowed to flourish in his presence. Something that I was trying to bottle up, and it was bad medicine in a bottle, right? It wasn't getting bottled up. It's not going to happen. It was just turning into a mess. And there was more conflict in me. And I'm trying to be somebody socially rewarded, R plus training, so on and so forth, trying to be somebody that is socially accepted around me, but just a giant mess on the inside, getting messier by the day. And then here comes a person who sees that richness inside me and celebrates it. And I'm able to nurture that and present that side. And this is by far a better version of me, by far. And I'm not bragging here, okay? But by far, this is, I think, and so I think if it's possible with human beings that, we manifest in others what we see in them, what we want to see in them is what comes out, what gets presented. That's going to be true for dogs. How can it not, right? If a complex being like a like a human being can shift and shape shift to fit your expectation and your bad narratives and your simplified narratives, and they're shape shifting to fit into that so unconsciously and so rapidly, dogs are so tuned into that, they do it so quickly. But that's not without a price. Everybody is paying a price on that process, right? And so I think this is the encouragement that I want to do, is to look beyond those beliefs of, what you think a dog is capable. Every time I present the story of a street dog, I have a few naysayers who will show up saying, no, but our dogs are not capable of it. Our dogs are different. We've bred them to be different and so on and so forth. No, 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 it's not that. Because our street dogs are pretty much a mix of every breed that exists in Europe for over 500 years. So it's not the breed. Your dogs are not capable of it because you're choosing not to see them as capable of it. And if you're not willing to give a chance and say there is more inside the dog than I'm able to see right now, you're never going to see the magic. Too bad. You want to see it, you have to believe that it's there and look for it.
Yeah, it's very powerful, and that fits again with the human side of things. There's been a lot of looking into belief systems and how they're influenced at a young age, of course, and how, as adults, those people who are able to adapt and challenge their own beliefs and have an element of self-awareness comes from a stability when they're younger and an opportunity to express and to examine those people who have a heavy dogma put on them at a young age, where this is what you must think, this is how you believe. They're less likely to have that kind of ability to be more flexible with belief systems and value systems. Now, this is the big thing about social structures for me. You, as Sindor, have your own story and your own needs and your own way to communicate and your own way to be. I, as Andrew, also. And we can focus purely on our own needs and how we are and how we are. That's fine. But if we're going to make a connection, we have to find a way of thinking, okay, this is the social dynamic that we want to work in and have a desire to want to connect. I think that's important. And then some of the kind of elements of that negotiated safety start to come in. And that's the important thing that you talk about a lot with when you do share a lot of the videos that you share with the streeties and how they engage in that conflict resolution. It's that negotiated element of it. And I think we're losing that in especially modern day life, because a lot of people talk about individual rights, which is important. But if we are all saying, well, this is my belief, this is my belief, this is my belief, but we're not able to compromise to find that common humanity, that common aspect of social cohesion, it becomes very challenging. And I think those who are very heavily indoctrinated in a certain view of the world, they will only be able to find social connections with those who think and feel the same. They won't be able to reach out to others who don't. And that, when we think about the broader aspect of the social fabric, it becomes a challenge. And I think that's what we're seeing. So again, if we're humble enough, the dogs have got something to remind us about as a social species, because we lost track of that a long time ago, about the importance of these aspects: negotiate safety, conflict resolution, how we connect, what's important in social structures.
Yeah, absolutely. So I must say that I think an important sort of setting of context here is a lot of people in the West may not realize, but Indian social structures are quite different. We straddle a strange kind of middle space where our urban social structures resemble a lot of typical Western social structures, right? Built on capitalistic ideas, so the individual takes center stage, so on and so forth. Whereas our rural settings still work with a very different kind of a social structure. And so when I observe this, I now live in rural India. I live in a village, and I get to see both sides of it. And the truth is that it's not like one is necessarily better than the other. I really think that it has to be about balance. Coming from a completely elder-based structure where the individual is kind of lost to the social fabric is not necessarily the healthiest thing. But at the same time, the complete focus on the individual is also problematic. I do think that so it's not, I'm not as much kind of advocating for one or the other, but really to kind of shine a light on the fact that social beings do social differently. It's not a single template, right? We all do social a little differently. Our societies look a little different. And that may be replicated in dogs as well. We don't know. Is this part of our DNA? When we say, as human beings, we do social this way, is this genetic for us? Is it learned? Is it cultural? And how much of that do we see in animals, this kind of difference and richness um of what they do? So yeah, I mean, I can talk about this endlessly, these comparisons, because when I sit and I observe dogs, I do see that they mirror so many different aspects of it. So we have fun on the site here. We will compare the dogs and the things that they're doing to each other, and I have a site manager here who will be like, "Ma'am, this dog reminds me of so and so, and the kind of things that she does," and I will say, "Oh, this dog reminds me of this guy and the kind of things he does," and we see ourselves reflected in there. I know some people can get hugely offended that I'm comparing human beings to dogs, but it's, for me, we are able to see ourselves in there. The city girl, the village elder, we are able to see all of those things and the different structures in there. Now, tell me this is not exciting. I mean, we should be studying this a lot more.
I agree. And it is exciting. I think what's wonderful about the conversations that are happening now, I think we've been stuck for a long time, especially here in the West, I think, about all the different notions about how to make animals behave. like we have done with children, actually. I think that's the thing, or more wide inside. But now we're really understanding about the the excitement, the richness of just trying to be present enough to be to kind of be aware of what the behavior is and what it means, and looking at the richness of that individual dog's life. We've done a lot of time, especially in the dog behavior science community, looking at dogs. I think that's been a big thing, trying to somehow homogenize that. Well, that's what a dog does. And then you only have to have a dog like I had with Milo, who was like, well, that might be okay, but that's not what this dog does.
Mm.
And Milo was my dog. He's not with us anymore, but he was that dog that really sent me off in a different direction, Cinder. I didn't come into the world thinking all this stuff. I've been on my own evolution myself, and it's only been probably the last, I don't know, 8, 9 years I've been doing things in a different way. Before that, I was very much like everybody else, doing things in the way that you're kind of told to be, right? So we go on these things, but it's almost like I call it the cul-de-sac. Really, we get stuck in this cul-de-sac, and we forget there is a way out behind us.
Mm.
We can look, oh my God, there is. I can look at other stuff. I can see this beautiful richness that's there if we allow them to. And that's definitely what you offer us. And it's a shame, really, because I know yourself, but also before you, people trying to bring attention to these wonderful animals and the dismissal of that by, well, almost both ends, really, the kind of academic side of things and also the kind of general kind of behavioral applicational side of it. So it's great that we're starting to have more respect for these wonderful animals and the stories you tell, because I think it's important for us. Well,
Yeah.
that's been amazing. Thank you, Cinder. Is there anything you want to kind of finish off on? Do you want to kind of leave everybody with before we?
Yeah. Yeah, as we've been thinking about this and as we're having this conversation, something that struck me, right? We've been there's this history of the so-called animal training world, the dog training world, the different views on it, and it's great. We've constantly been talking about how do we get better at this? How do we provide better welfare? And it's great. Conferences like this are great, right? That we're having this conversation to ask ourselves, how do we do better by them? But I think the kind of things that I've been talking about, and Andy, you and I have been talking about, I think the tone and the attitude is a little different, and we need to shine a light on that because um, this path that we are taking of it's a seemingly harder path that involves a lot of self-reflection. It involves a lot of asking questions about our own biases. It seems like a painfully difficult path, but it doesn't sit on a mantle with sort of an altruistic attitude, right? Where I'm what I'm trying to say is we don't have to limit ourselves to looking at dog and animal welfare with an altruistic knight in shining armor attitude towards it. I think that this approach that we talk about is a self journey. It is an opportunity, an invitation to make our lives, our human lives, so much richer in the presence of our dogs in a way that we have not probably explored in the past. So I think that when we look at animal well-being, we should not other ourselves from them and look at their well-being as how do we, as masters, make this happen for them, but look at our collective well-being, this unit that we are, this dyad that we are. We How do we look at the collective well-being and what is fundamental and core at this, these things that we talk about accepting ourselves, making space for mess, and all of that is extraordinary acts of kindness towards ourselves, right? And so for me, what it has been is a platform for me to practice that on the dog and say, hey, I can do that for myself too. And then
Yes.
you do it on myself, and I'm like, hey, I can do that to others too. And wow, okay, who I am to others, who I am to myself has changed. And that's why I dare to sometimes say that what we are talking about is almost a spiritual journey. And I know that I run a risk of being dismissed off very quickly by the science minded. But, okay, we can spar on the science. That's fine. I'm not averse to it. We can do that. But it would be a pity to let this opportunity go. And I think that's what this should be a call to. Let's do this for ourselves.
Beautiful way to finish, because that's one of the kind of points of the emotional well-being in animals conference, really. It isn't a dog conference, a cat conference. It is emotional well-being in animals, and we are an animal. I think this is
Yeah,
good. And everything that anybody says in this conference, we can relate to multi-species, including ourselves. I think that's
yeah.
really well. I love you, Cinder. I love everything you do. Thank you so much for offering your time today and sharing so much with us.
My pleasure as always, Andy.